Welcome to another episode of the Apex Perspective podcast. Today I have with me Anirban Sengupta, who's currently the CTO at Aviatrix. Now, Anirban started off his career in software engineering positions. Later on, he's led at the executive level of multiple companies, leading technical roles. And right now, he's the CTO at Aviatrix. But Anirban, can you tell me a little bit more about your experience, your background, and what led you to essentially Aviatrix?
Yeah, so as Aryan, number one, thank you for including me in the podcast. And as you said, that I started as out of college computer science graduate as a software engineer, and it has been a long career. I I had many roles in my last in my whole career, but one of the things which was always front and center, right, for me is curiosity about technology, right? So technology, high tech, so to speak, is extremely changes over years. Nowadays, it kind of changes like every week. Like if you look at the whole AI revolution that we are going through, right, things are changing like on a weekly basis, right? So there were two things which I really valued all through my career. First is curiosity, right? And I would always be at the edge or the bleeding edge of technology because that's what fascinates me. I call myself as a technology chaser, right? And the next part is the impact, right? And those were the two things which really motivates me, and that's how most of my career has been, right? To go and explore new technologies, number one, and then see how I can make an impact using that new technologies. And that is how it has proceeded. Like I was at Google before this. I built out a lot of the Kubernetes. I built out a lot of the Istio and all that new technology. Before that, I was at VMware. I built a lot of networking and security virtualization, which was kind of the first in the industry. I built out before that like video conferencing. I built the first 1080p video conference setup, right? And now we are in the AI era. So one of the things is that I'm really looking at how to secure our agentic AI systems that is kind of growing like wildfire. And a big part of that
Certainly.
in my CTO's role today, right, is how do we secure AI, especially agentic AI infrastructures.
Excellent. So all the way until VMware, it looked like you were leading a lot of technical roles specifically, but this is at this point with this particular company, this is where you started to have more of the business requirements. What I'm curious about is how did you navigate that shift and what did you learn was required from both the technical perspective and the business perspective when introducing new products?
Right. Yeah. So you're right. The first part of my career was purely technical, right? I was a voracious coder and all of that. But then there came a time when I figured that understanding technical pieces and being an implementer was not enough to create a bigger impact. So remember, I talked about curiosity and impact, right? So there was a point where I figured that without understanding the business perspective, increasing impact is not as easy, right? And also, like to really create an impact, right, you have to go and talk to customers. You have to understand the business requirements from the customers, what what really is the impact and the value for the customer, right? That is where I kind of moved to a more business understanding. I have never been in a 100% business role because there also I think that if I'm not technical enough and I don't understand business, right? So I need to understand both. So personally, I think that purely business role and no technical role, or purely technical role, no business understanding, either
Right.
of them does not kind of work fully. That's why it's a balance between technical and
And
business.
I'd love to make a commentary on what you said. It's really understanding the business background, because if your intention is to put full impact with your skill set, a lot of doctors have a very similar concept where when they want to maximize their impact, they have to understand the business side of things, right? For example, in the last decade alone, urgent cares is an industry that doubled in from 7,000 locations to 14,000 statewide locations. Why that happened is because there's a business understanding behind how to make them profitable, right? Now, if you look at urgent cares, they average about, I believe, 500,000 to 800,000 profit, whereas before, in 10 years ago, that was not near the same figure. But to maximize impact, especially underserved areas, you have to understand the business side of things. So when it came to introducing new products to actually maximize your impact with your skill set, what were some new concepts in business you had to understand that really allowed you to mix that skill set?
Yeah. So first of all, it's what the customers are really looking for,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
That's fundamental. Everything has to start from the customer's perspective, right? And that is the critical part of the whole business mind, right? It is, I call it outside in perspective rather than inside out perspective, right? So it's the customer, you understand what the customers are looking for, right? And then look at that, what would be the business impact based on what customers are looking at, right? And then from the impact which the customers are looking at and from how the business part can work out with the customers is what technology you can use, right, to make it a viable business outcome. So I'll give a very simple example, right? As you said, like our technology, right, is used in many, actually 40% of healthcare uses our technology, right? And as you said, that our big use case today is how do we connect urgent care, hospitals, and cloud, right, to make sure that they are all connected. Today, it's 100% connected world, right? And one of the things which I had looked at is that if I need to look at what healthcare needs today with the explosion of these urgent care, remote, mobile centers, right? The key part which is really needed, it's not just connectivity, but a secure connectivity across all, right? Because it's a HIPAA compliant platform, and you need security, you need encryption, you need
Very rigorous,
compliance. Exactly, right? So
as it should be.
exactly, yes. And that's where the business part of it comes to the picture, so that I had to go and understand what the business needs and then how we can provide a very viable, cost conscious solution, right? Because the thing is that, yeah, sure, you increase your urgent care number of sites, but if it is cost prohibitive, it is not viable,
Exactly.
right?
And what was really interesting about what you did is you introduced new products on the market. These weren't products that were already there and you improved, rather they're completely new.
Yes.
So it looked like you identified what was a gap on the business side and you fill that gap with your technological expertise. But what I'm curious about is, were all three products that you introduced, were they all in the healthcare sector, or were they in different sectors as well? Because that would require you to understand the gaps in those different industries as well.
Yeah, so there are some commonality, but there are also some specificity, right? So I'll give an example. Say, for example, you have the healthcare vertical, then you have manufacturing, you have retail, right? You have financial services, right? There is certain things which is common among those from a technical perspective, right? But when you look at solution, which is where the business part comes in, right? So the understanding the business for healthcare is very different from the problems we need to solve for manufacturing, right?
Okay.
It's a very different problem you need to solve for financial services, right? So though there is this base technology which is somewhat common, you have even things like how the customer is going to access that market, right? Or access the technology, for example, right? So the thing is that, like, if you are going for software and internet, right, there in general, right, the people have way more understanding of high tech, right? They understand how software and all of this how cool technology works. But if you're going in a different space like manufacturing or healthcare, they're doctors, right?
Hmm.
Now, you don't want to have your doctors and nurses know exactly how the whole technology works, but they are just doing a consumption and it has to be very easy to consume, right, from a healthcare professional perspective. Now,
Hmm.
that changes if you are in, say, software and internet, right? Because
Certainly.
they are doing differently, their consumption is different. So you have to, like, the main thing which I had to do is understand the common technology, but also understand the business aspect and the customers in these verticals so that we can provide a different experience for each of them.
Excellent. So what I'm understanding is that while there could be the same technical expertise that's applied to different sectors, you first have to understand each niche industry itself and understand what is needed here, identify the requirements of what's needed here, and then figure out from the technical side, how can we solve that with the technical expertise? I love that.
100%.
Love that. So later on, you moved to Google and then subsequently you went to Aviatrix. Tell me a little bit more about that transition and more about, I guess, what you do here today at Aviatrix.
Sure. Yeah. So in Google, I used to work with one of the cool latest technology called Kubernetes and serverless, which is sometimes called the cloud native technologies. I built a lot of that technology. But then I figured that there is a bigger impact, right, that I can achieve, right, with using multi-cloud. Because Google is only one slice of the cloud, right?
Mhm.
But there is, of course, AWS, there is Oracle, there is Microsoft Azure. Not just that, there are all these neo clouds which are coming up, like, for example, CoreWeave, right?
Mhm.
So what I thought is that in place of just having the impact on GCP or Google Cloud, right, coming to Aviatrix, we are a multi-cloud networking and security platform. So I can provide a much better help to the customer when it is a multi-cloud and it has a much bigger impact because it's not just GCP, right? It's also AWS, impact on AWS and Azure and OCI, and even we support like Ali Cloud, we support in China, all of these. So it is a higher impact.
Mhm. Excellent. You said at the beginning of this podcast that you're focusing on agentic AI and specifically at the enterprise level. What I'm curious about is how I've understood from a small business perspective how agentic AI is being taught certain tasks and then being automated through that sequence. But at the enterprise level, at a larger company, how is it being leveraged and how do you see it being leveraged in the future?
Yeah. So today, how I would say is that um, agentic AI is the most advanced technology and has the highest deployment, right? If I
Mhm.
really look at by numbers, right, it is everywhere. And if a enterprise is not using it, I highly recommend they should use it. But
Mhm.
now the thing what has kind of happened is, I don't know, it is somewhat in the early internet era. Sorry, I'm dating myself, but but the thing is that every company, right, they are deploying agents full force. The
Mhm.
part which is not happening today, right, is how can an enterprise safely and securely deploy agents, right, in their environment.
Mhm.
So it's all over internet adoption again. Like it was maybe mid 90s when like internet was going like crazy, right? Everybody was deploying it, everybody using it. It was such an amazing growth. But then all of a sudden people started getting breached. And that is where the whole thing about cybersecurity came up,
This is
right?
why
There
you said
was
safely.
Yes, safely, right? And that is where we are working on, right? From Aviatrix point of view, how enterprise can safely deploy agentic systems, right? And make sure that they are secure, they are not getting hacked, they are not getting breached, there is no exfiltration, there is no PII data compromise, right? So all of that in a agentic system. So that is what we are working on today.
Okay. And are agentic systems, are they more prone or more vulnerable to cybersecurity attacks?
Yes, that's a great. So there are two aspects of it. Very great, great question. So one is just the sheer volume of it, right? So when human beings are working on it, but then an agent to a human being can be like 100 to 1, right?
Wow.
So that is a proliferation of attack surface, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
So whenever you have way larger number of agents than humans, right? That's the big attack surface which gets generated. That's the number one, right? The
Okay.
bigger the attack surface, the more vulnerable this enterprise is. Okay, that's
Okay.
number one, right? But number two, which is very different from how deterministic software used to work, is that if you really look at it in a scale, there is software which used to be extremely deterministic. So you could run it, it will give you the same result, you can test it, all of that. And then you are humans. Humans are the most unpredictable things in this world, so
Sure.
to speak, right? But agents are basically somewhere in the middle. They are not deterministic. They think kind of, and then they change and they adapt and they learn. So they are somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
So now what happens is that agents can be extremely, it can change from secure to insecure depending on what they do and what they learn, right?
Okay.
So it can be completely safe at certain point, but because it is morphing and changing and learning, it can become more vulnerable, right? As the life cycle proceeds about
Okay.
the agents, right? So what that means is, number one, the attack surface is higher, and the the prone, it is more attack prone,
Yes.
right?
Understood.
Yeah, so that's why
Perfect.
there are these two vectors that makes it way more vulnerable than a traditional software.
Excellent. Well, what we'll do now, and I really appreciate those perspectives. Those are completely new ones. I think that the sheer volume, like you said, I think from what I understand, if there's more tasks being done, does that increase the opportunity for attacks? Is that the reason
Yes.
why? Okay,
Yeah.
understood. Yes, those are some new and compelling perspectives, and I really appreciate how you were able to explain how there are very simple, there are definitely technical expertise that are applicable to different sectors. However, these problems have to be solved uniquely depending on the industry. So I really appreciate those perspectives today. So what I'll do now is shift this conversation to a little bit more about you, Anirban. And the first question I have for you is, what is something about you or your life that you wish more people knew about?
Oh, that's a difficult question.
I'm sure
Yeah.
it's very interesting. I asked this question to every entrepreneur, executive, very accomplished individuals. This is the hardest question of the podcast for them.
Yeah. So one of the things which I think I would say that I treasure, right? It is about the balance of what we do and balance of why we do it,
Yes.
right? So sometimes we do things but we forget the why part, right? And what I generally try to do is a balance of the why, right, based on the what, right? So it's about the purpose of why somebody is doing something, right, and what it is doing. And what I try to do, right, is to make sure that the why part of my what, right, is the purpose of what I'm trying to do, and I have a clear conscience, right, why I'm doing what I'm doing.
And Anirban, I have to say this, I could not agree more. Actually, 2 years ago, I did a TED talk about finding your why. This is my poster there. I think that if an individual understands why they're doing what they're doing and it actually means a lot to them, that's the difference between spending the night and doing what you have to be doing and then spending the night wasting your time, right?
Yep.
You're going to be voluntarily wanting to do what is required if you know why you're doing what you're doing. Otherwise,
Yes.
you have no reason to be disciplined. I don't believe in discipline for no reason. I believe in discipline through reason. So I absolutely believe that's a very good point you made there. And one more question I have for you is, I guess at the beginning of your career, what kind of person were you? Or let's just say 20s or late 20s, what kind of person were you? And how much do you think you've changed principle wise to now?
Oh, these are hard questions, but um, there has been a uh, fundamental change over time, and I don't know exactly when it changed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, in the first part of my career, it was more about me, what I do, am I getting promoted, right? Am I making an impact, right? So, first, I would say decade plus was about me,
Mm-hmm.
right? Somewhere, I don't know exactly when it changed about others, how I can help others to achieve their potential, how I can help somebody else, right, to grow in their career. So if I have to say that the beginning part of my career was about me, right, but now it is about more about other people, people
Mm-hmm.
around me, right, not about exactly me, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I can't pinpoint when that changed.
Okay.
Somewhere it changed
But it did
in,
happen.
but it did happen. So that's a big difference which I see between when I was in my 20s and now as a CTO. For example, as a
Yep.
CTO, my job is to inculcate, right, what other people do and how other people build technology and how other people grow in their career and in their career path, right,
Mm-hmm.
rather than exactly me, what I can do myself.
Very interesting. I really like that perspective. So what I'll do now is I'll share a quick perspective regarding fitness and health, and we'll go ahead and conclude the podcast with Anirban's plans for this year or the coming year. The perspective I really want to share today is how can you make a health and fitness approach as time efficient as possible? As you know, Anirban, a lot of my audience are entrepreneurs and executives, so I want to make this as relevant as possible. So traditionally, what a lot of people think about when it comes to making a health transformation is that you have to attend to a gym, you have to attend to a studio, and that's the only way you can make a transformation. The issue with that perspective is that not all individuals have the capacity to go drive to a gym, come back, do this 4 times a week. That's 8 to 10 hours of a week, right? So you have to really restructure how you look at this. The most important thing is you have to identify what are the requirements. Because if we don't attend to the requirements, then nothing else matters. If you look at the National Institute of Health, there's really one primary way you lose weight or you lose fat. And this is what I actually use myself to lose 70 pounds. Is you have to achieve a negative energy balance, which means you get the right amount of movement, you combine that with the right calorie intake. Out of these two, what takes the time is the movement. So you have to prioritize doing the movement in a location independent manner as opposed to location dependent manner. What I mean by that is you don't have to go to a gym, you don't have to go to a studio, but rather you can get the same amount of movement by utilizing a different route, like step count, like walking. There's a precise amount you have to be doing, but the idea is, can you make this location independent and make it time efficient? Yes, you can. And that's why I would say first identify the requirements and then come up with a new pathway to attend those requirements that are time efficient. So what I would specifically recommend here is looking at step count. And that is something you can do while you're watching this podcast, while you're potentially traveling, or if there's a ground underneath you, you can do it essentially. And that's the idea. Can you identify the requirements and attend to them as time efficiently as possible? And this is actually what I even use myself to lose over 70 pounds. But that's the idea. Can you really restructure what the requirements are, restructure the pathways to attend to the requirements of the idea? So with that, we'll go ahead and move this conversation to your boss plans for this year or the coming year, whether it's professional or personal.
Yes, that's great, and that's great learning for me too. And one of actually my goals is to get healthy. Um, And the thing is that, for example, for step count, my goal is to get 10,000
Yeah.
steps every day. And many of the things, as you're saying, right? So, like for example, some of the one-on-ones I take while walking around the building, right? You can integrate it with your daily life wherever you are. Doesn't matter, right? And the other part I want to also put out there is that mental health is also extremely important, because at least for me, it's a very stressful job, right? And a lot of physical health also is dependent on mental health, right? So that is another thing which I'm also looking at, apart from the physical health, is how I can manage my mental health, right?
Excellent.
Apart from the physical health. And that it's a holistic health which is very important to me. That is number one. That's from a little bit more personal side.
Sure.
But it also, with a better mental health and physical health, it becomes much easier to also on the work
Everything
perspective.
else.
Everything else matters. Like if you're not physically and mentally healthy, everything else is kind of moot. But on the professional side, what we are really looking at uh, is how we can really help to secure our digital assets. If you look at today, right, most of our assets in life is actually digital,
Yeah.
right? Like starting from my the deeds on my house to my kids' pictures, right, to whatever you talk about, right, everything is digital, right? And one of the things which is like personally motivating for me is how we can secure the digital assets, right, for the whole world and everybody individually, right? Just think of it, right? If I lose all the, or most probably same as yours, right? So, like if you lose all of your photographs,
Yeah.
which you have somewhere in the cloud or your phone, wherever it is, you lose a big part of your life, big part of your memories, right? So
Exactly.
that's why from the professional point of view, my whole goal in life is to secure the world's digital asset, and that's what we are
Love
doing
it.
from Aviatrix.
Love it. And Anirban, I want to say thank you for coming on the podcast. You shared some really critical points today and some new perspectives, fresh new perspectives to the podcast. So I really appreciate your time today. This was Aryan Mohindra and Anirban